All right, let's talk about a skill that can literally transform your professional and personal relationships. Calm assertiveness. We're going to dive into how you can communicate with total clarity and confidence, especially when things get tense.
Okay, let's just start with a really honest question. Have you ever been in a tense conversation, walked away, and just started replaying it in your head, thinking, why did I say that? Yeah, of course you have. We've all been there. Well, the way out of that cycle is a skill, and it's called calm assertiveness. It's all about being able to say what you think and what you need clearly, but without lashing out or just completely shutting down. It's not about being a robot. It's about being in the driver's seat of your own response. Now, to get really good at this, we first have to understand what in the world is going on inside our own heads when we get triggered. So let's talk about your brain and a little thing called the amygdala hijack. What's so fascinating is how primal this whole reaction is. I mean, this is an ancient survival circuit. Your amygdala, that's kind of like your brain's alarm system, it senses a threat. The problem is, it can't tell the difference between a critical email from your boss and, a tiger about to pounce. It slams the panic button, your logical brain basically goes offline, and their body just defaults to fight, flight, freeze. And that's exactly why it feels like our emotions literally take over our bodies. The name amygdala hijack is just perfect, isn't it? It's like your rational mind has been taken hostage by its own security system. It's automatic, it is lightning fast, and yep, it happens to every single one of us. But here is the most important part. While that initial trigger is totally automatic, our response doesn't have to be. We can actually learn to choose a much better path than just fight or flight. See, without this skill, most of us get stuck in one of two unhelpful ruts. First, there's the passive style. You avoid the conflict, you keep the peace, but inside, oh yeah, that resentment is just building and building. Then there's the other extreme, aggressive. You attack, you try to dominate, you might win that argument, but you're probably torching the relationship in the process. There's also a third one, which is just reactive. That's pure impulsive emotion, which is basically like throwing gasoline on a fire. But now look at that fourth option. That's our goal, assertive communication. It's calm, it's clear, it's respectful, and it's the only style that actually builds trust and gets you to a real solution. Okay, so that's the what and the why. Now for the really good stuff, the how. How do we actually do this in the real world when the pressure's on? Let's get practical and break down the assertiveness framework. So here are the 6 main steps. It all starts with something so simple yet so powerful. Pause. Just take a breath before you respond. Then you quickly name the emotion you're feeling to yourself. From there, it's about using neutral language, lowering the intensity of your voice, not your message, setting clear boundaries, and staying focused right here on the present issue. Now let's zoom in on a tool from that framework that is an absolute game changer. I'm talking about the I statement. It's the simple formula that lets you communicate without blaming anyone. It goes like this. I feel, you name the emotion. When, you state the specific behavior. Because, you explain the impact. And then the most important part, I would prefer, where you state what you need. And here's what that looks like in the real world. Instead of saying, you're always changing things on me, which just makes someone defensive, you use the formula, I feel frustrated when deadlines change last minute because it affects my planning. I would prefer more notice. See the difference? One starts a fight, the other starts a conversation. That framework is amazing, but what about when you're live, right in the middle of a really tough conversation? Let's talk about some more advanced skills for keeping yourself regulated in real time. Okay, here's a fantastic technique for de-escalating a tense situation. It's called the acknowledge and assert method. And really, its main job is to lower the other person's defensiveness so they can actually hear what you need to say next. It's a simple 1-2 punch. First, you acknowledge their perspective. Now, you don't have to agree with them, you just have to show them that you hear them. Something like, I understand this is important to you, and then you immediately and calmly assert your position. But I'm not able to commit to that timeline. It's so respectful, but it's also incredibly firm. And remember, your body is in this conversation too. You can actually make tiny physical shifts to calm your whole nervous system down. Deliberately slow your breathing, making the exhale longer than the inhale is the key. Unclench your jaw, drop your shoulders from up around your ears. These tiny little actions send a massive signal back to your brain that says, hey, we're safe. Now, it's just as critical to know what not to do. So let's look at these common traps. First, don't just suppress your feelings. That's a recipe for resentment.
Second, don't disguise aggression as just being brutally honest. Also, try to keep it concise. Over-explaining can actually make your message weaker. And finally, remember, you can only control your actions, not the other person's. So why put in all this effort? Let's talk about the real payoff here. This is all about making a huge shift, moving from mindless reaction to deliberate, intentional communication. You might think being assertive sounds more stressful in the moment. And yeah, that makes sense. But what if I told you that over time, it dramatically reduces your overall stress? How does that even work? And this is the real prize. When you communicate this way, you slash all that draining internal conflict. You stop those emotional pressure cooker moments from even happening. Your relationships become clearer, which builds trust. And all of that builds your own confidence and a sense of psychological safety. You learn to trust yourself even when things get tough. So, if you take just one thing away from our time together, let it be this. Being triggered is automatic. That first flash of anger or frustration, you can't stop it. But how you respond in the seconds that follow, that is absolutely trainable. And that brings us to one final thought for you to carry with you. Just think about it for a second. What's one conversation, either at work or at home, that you could completely change for the better using this approach? The power to shift that whole dynamic is right there in your hands.